Aloha, everybody. Ronnie Landis here, your host of the Holistic Life Mastery radio show. And today we have our second interview on our remastered interview series from my 2013 podcast, the Expanded Health and Human Potential radio show. And I got to say, listening to these interviews where I haven't listened to them in about, maybe a year and a half to 2 years is truly profound. I didn't actually realize at that time the kind of diamonds that I was standing on. And it's just really fun to listen back to some of these interviews and to pick up new insights, new clues as I've evolved and matured in my path as a health educator and as a researcher. It's interesting for me to pick up new little nuances and bits of information that maybe at the time I didn't fully understand or I couldn't fully comprehend, and now it's coming back. And what's even cooler about an interview like this, the one that you're about to be exposed to, is that so much of the information that our guest is sharing is such a big part and a foundation of what I focus on in my own message and my own educational vehicles and the way that I share this information with other people. And it's fun to see how these interviews that I did way back when are actually so influential in the work that I do now. So this has been really fun for me just to kind of dive back into. And for everyone else, I think this is just providing extraordinary content that otherwise would have gone unused. If I would have just kept on with this podcast and just started a whole new series of interviews, then this information couldn't be repurposed and literally couldn't be put out into the world. So without further ado, our guest is a man named Wade Lightheart. And Wade Lightheart, since our first interview that we did two and a half years ago, he has become a close friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine. He's a brilliant researcher and has focused most of his life in athletics and bodybuilding. So him and me had an instant resonance when we first met, and then ever since we've just been collaborating on different projects. And I actually work as an ambassador and an educator for his company, BioOptimizers, which is a company that focuses on high-grade probiotics, enzymes, platinum-based minerals, and other things of that nature. But they have a specific focus on proteolytic enzymes and probiotics. And so you're going to hear a lot of information in this podcast about enzymes and probably some information you didn't know. He doesn't just stick on the surface level. Both him and me go into the depths of the enzyme situation, why enzymes are so critical for all aspects of healing, and how we've depleted our enzyme reservoir over the process of our life. And we go into so many other areas. I mean, it's truly an adventure that we're going to take you on. And before we jump into that, I want to let everyone know that the enzymes that both me and Wade work with are the BioOptimizers enzymes, and you can find the direct affiliate link in the show notes. So you can just go to the show notes, and there will be a link there for you that you can go to that page and get all the information and order them for your own use if you'd like. And then also, as always, I want to direct your attention to the Holistic Health Mastery certification course, which is my online video-based nutrition and lifestyle certification course, holistichealthmastery.com. Okay, without further ado, I want to welcome on my guest, Mr. Wade Lightheart. Enjoy. Hey everyone, this is Ronnie Landis, and we're back on again with another episode of the Expanded Health and Human Potential radio show. So today I have a special guest back on for the second time. And for those who may not have heard the last interview or know who this gentleman is, his name is Wade Lightheart. And he's a natural bodybuilder and health expert. He's actually the president of the Awesome Health Alliance and the co-founder of the Institute of Advanced Nutritional Health Sciences. He's also a 3-time Canadian natural bodybuilding champion. He's a sports nutritionist, an author, a speaker, and most of all, which I like the most, is that he's an enlightened seeker. And Wade's become a friend of mine over the last 6 months. I first saw him speak at the Raw Living Expo in Sedona, California, and he's nothing short of an amazing informational presenter, but he is one of the few people that actually lives it full on, and that's why we brought him onto the show. So without further ado, Wade, how you doing?
Oh, man, I'm just charged up to be on the show with Ronnie Landis. You're doing such great things in the world. I look forward to your episodes all the time, and I'm just really, really excited to be here and hopefully be able to provide some insight for all your listeners because, boy, you've got some really cutting-edge stuff, and I can't wait to dive into it today with you.
Right on, right on. I'm glad to know that you're checking out the interviews.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things is we need to be lifelong learners, and I certainly don't know everything. Actually, I don't know that much. I know a little bit about a few things, and I share that, and I interact with people such as yourself so that I can learn even more and stay open to the latest developments and our understanding and awareness about the challenges that we face and the opportunities as being humans on the planet.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. You said a key thing, which we're going to get into, is that the very real thing is that we do face challenges, and it doesn't serve us to put our head in the sand. But once we know the challenges, it's powerful to understand that we have more solutions than ever before in any point in history, and that's what we're going to dive into. So I say let's just jump in. Now, Wade, as you know, and as some of the listeners may know, in our world today, metabolic disorders are becoming something of a common trend, ranging from obesity, diabetes, neurological and nervous system dysfunctions, gut dysbiosis. As of lately, that's hit my radar is really the estrogen inflammations and, a host of all other kind of debilitations, all over the board. So the thing I want to jump into right away with you is I'd like to talk about the effects of what's called oxidative stress. We've heard these terms kind of get thrown around in the alternative community: oxidative stress, oxidation, anti-oxidation, or antioxidants. I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on how oxidative stress impacts our daily life and the effects of cellular corrosion on our metabolic function?
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening, I want to keep this as simple as we can, of course.
Absolutely.
I think we can sometimes, one of the big scary things is we complicate things with big sounding terminology, and I'm guilty of that as much as anybody else. Basically, oxidative stress is rusting. If you put steel outside in the elements, it turns black and rusts. Well, if you cut an apple and leave it on the counter, it rusts. And you leave people out in the elements and they rust. If you go into a nuclear reactor, you rust really fast. That would be massive oxidative stress, and you'd be dead very quickly. If you're in cold environments, any kind of environmental influence can affect the wear and tear on the protoplasm, or your physicality, the body that carts around your soul. And so now here's the interesting thing. If you don't have any stress, you'd be dead. So there is some positive components to it. But in today's world, we have been subjected to a massive increase of elements that we haven't really learned to adapt to as a species. And primarily these come from environmental pollutants, toxins, And of course, as you mentioned, one of the big things with metabolic stuff is estrogen-based toxins, oftentimes from the plastic industry, i.e. bottled water, etc., etc. So it's a big factor, and it's something that has infiltrated the health or the fitness community as much as any community I have seen. And I have all kinds of athletes or particularly a lot of ladies who have contacted me. I think it's just as apparent for men, but ladies just tend to seek out help more than men. And they're calling me, and they've been on diets, and they've been doing their exercise routines, or they've tried all these things, and nothing seems to work, and they keep gaining weight, and they don't know what to do, and they're having mood disorders or this or that, and low self-esteem, and it's the whole cascade of effects that go on. And we've got to turn it around, and there are ways to turn it around, and we talk about that, and part of it is things that you address in a lot of your podcasts. Right.
And I want to say I appreciate your desire to simplify this, because there's a lot of big terms out there, and a guy like me I'm kind of really into the science and everything, but these things really can be chunked down to their core principles, and so I think that's what we should probably get into is, how can we start to use nutrition to offset the rusting effect of just the challenges that we face in our world?
Well, this is something that I got really interested in a number of years ago. Of course, if people know my story, back in 2003, I was on my way to the Mr. Universe contest, and I was competing as a vegetarian, but I certainly didn't have this information, and I was using a number of different products that were causing damage to my system. I just didn't know any better. I was trying to adapt a meat-eating, industry-based system onto a vegetarian, plant-based diet. Now, albeit I did achieve what I wanted to achieve, far as a cosmetic look. I was, ripped and lean, and did my thing, and that was great. But after that contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. Now, leading up to that contest was a restrictive diet, was extremely intense. I don't recommend it to anybody. I was training a lot, doing lots of oxidative stress from training, which all athletes do. But on top of that, I was, back in those days, I was drinking things like diet sodas. Not good. I was using food products like rice cakes, which is common, with all the little chemicals and stuff on it, and that was doing extra damage. I was drinking highly acidic water out of plastic bottles. I thought I was doing a good job, and I was doing a good job to get to a certain look, but I didn't know what kind of damage I was doing to my body. But I felt terrible going up to this event. I felt absolutely rotten, and everybody in the industry says, well, that's just the way it is. It's everybody that competes in a contest feels rotten and feels terrible, and I thought, this is insane. And then after the contest, I gained all the weight back, but I felt better. I looked like crap, so I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow, but I felt better. I'm like, what's going on here? And then I learned about how to build the body from the inside out. I was a bodybuilder building the body from the outside in, doing all these cosmetic, in vogue kind of methodologies that have been propagated by magazines and video sites and all that sort of stuff over the last 30 years. And it'll get you a certain place to a certain while, but the damage builds up, and then you end up in that problem. And then I met a guy by the name of Dr. Michael O'Brien, and he taught me about enzymes and probiotics and eating a raw food diet and taking minerals and alkalizing my body tissues and getting into green foods and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. But, this guy was rebuilding cancer patients, from death's door, like Bernard Jensen, legend. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know about that story. I won't get into it too deep. But I was like, okay, well, this guy's proven it. I'll try it. I tried it. In 6 months' time, I couldn't believe I had regained my physical dimensions and proportions. But the best part was I felt amazing. And that was 10 years ago. And I can today I can train harder, longer than I could back then, and it's easier and it's a lot more fun. And the best part is I don't have to do all those wacky things that people think, and I do, though, avoid some of the things that are taught to us, like, take these chemical, Red Bulls and energy drinks, or, drink all kinds of like caffeinated beverages out of aluminum cans and stuff like that. I don't do those things because of the damage that it does to my system. It rusts me too fast. My body can't deal with all that rust, and then some internal organ gets compromised, and that's based on your genetics and the stress and all that. But the overall stress does the damage, and then you're like, okay, your body starts shutting down non-vital functions and then moving into vital functions, and that's when disease comes. And of course now the big thing is with metabolic issues and the inability to convert T4 into T3, adrenaline fatigue, and that whole interrelation, and the lack of absorbable live plant-based proteins coming into the body that the body can easily utilize and regulate metabolism.
That was a lot.
That's a lot. Sorry, I can ramble, so cut me off if you need to. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely it's on point. And where I want to go with this, obviously, everything that you just said, I want to take it back here before I move on to the next subject. Maybe we can get into this for a little bit. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned a term that is actually very near and dear to my heart, which is biophotonic resonance, or biophotons. And so I know you know all about this, and I really got into the research of Fritz Albert Popp. This is actually what really, took a turn for me years ago in my raw food education, was the idea that in the 1960s or 70s, Fritz Albert Popp came to the conclusion in his research that the body actually is a storehouse for what's called biophotons, and that's transmitted from the UV lighting of the sun and given literally as a storage implant to plant life through photosynthesis. And so when we eat plants, we actually get this storage of light energy. And I'm kind of curious on what your thoughts are on that concept in terms of healing and maintenance.
It's a great question, and something I've given considerable study to. And of course, my research led me to Eastern philosophy and some of the Vedic or Ayurvedic manuscripts. And basically, and I cover this in my book, Staying Alive in a Toxic World, in the sunlight chapter. And basically, we live in a solar system. Let's start there. And everything is a form of condensed light. And when you eat a plant, plants have chlorophyll, and they are able to convert that light. Now, I believe, and this is indicated by an incredible amount of people, that there is intelligent information inside that light. And not only is it energy, but it's actually information.
Yeah.
And that information allows the cells to talk to each other. And you only have to check out, like, if you go out on a nice sunny day, how do you feel? It feels like your cells are dancing and feeling happy. And if it's cloudy and rainy, you don't quite feel the same way. And so from that, I started extrapolating things. And of course, I followed a lot of Yogananda's teachings, who really got into the vibratory frequency of foods, and added Bernard Jensen. And one of the things I looked at is, I think that we have a color spectrum of 7 basic colors, of course, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, which correspond with the chakra levels. And of course, vegetables come in very specific colors, and they have certain resonant frequencies, and there's correlation to how they affect internal organs. And for me, I try to keep things as broad and as simple as, like, well, I don't need to understand all the little components of it. I get it on a general scale, but it just makes sense to me to have a great big rainbow salad every single day in the middle of the afternoon, which is much colors as I can possibly put into it. So I put reds and yellows and greens and blues. I try to get all of those colors in that frequency. And when I eat that, there's something inside my body that tells me that this is good. and the science is extreme, but I'm just like, it's good. It's simple. When I eat blueberries, there's something about, I could eat 500 pounds of blueberries and never be satisfied. I just love blueberries. There's something magic about that fruit. And I had the good fortune of getting some of this fruit right out of the woods here in New Brunswick, where it's like, this is not the high bush stuff. These are these little tiny berries that it takes you like a week to get a cup while you're picking it. And you eat this stuff. Now, there isn't much calories in it. If I put that in a kilometer, it burns up, but there's almost no calories. If you eat it, all these nutritional science that's out there would say, well, there's not, it's got antioxidant stuff. When I eat that stuff, something goes on in my brain that says, this is really good, and this is different than blueberries you get in the store. Same thing with wild strawberries. They're amazing, but they're little tiny things. And it's almost like the smaller they are, the more packed they become. It's kind of like the reverse of our modern society, that more is better. It's like the smaller something is, it seems to have more power, more condensed, or more information in it. It's a kind of an inverse relationship.
I'm just sitting here laughing because of how true that statement is, and it's kind of like our conventional outlook on raw food. One of the things I've spent a few years trying to dissect and investigate was the proliferation of all these different raw food diets and all their different kind of concepts. But what I'm realizing is they're all based in and around of what society's options are. So what society provides for us is really, not to knock it because I'm grateful for it, but is really like overly hybrid foods, specifically fruits, that are bred to have more sugar yield, less mineral content, and are actually enlarged. Whereas, like you just mentioned, perfect example of a blueberry in nature is almost like a pellet size, where if you get a cultivated variety, it's about 3 times that size, and it may have a little more caloric value, but you have to eat more to get as much.
And that, you nailed it right there. There's where I think things went sideways. The calorie model of dieting. So to go and this is what sets people up into the metabolic problems. And then, of course, this is what translates and it kind of proliferates in dietary systems inside of raw food systems and that sort of thing. And the raw foodies kind of got away from it a little bit more than the other philosophies around diet. And I'm not here to brandish one or condone another or anything else. I'm just trying to share from my observation of the last 25 years or so. And for people out there that haven't understood this, basically the calorie model is this. They throw the food into a machine that burns the food, and they measure how much heat that comes off it, and they say, it has this many calories. And then they dissect it, and they tell you if those calories come from protein, carbohydrates, fats, or alcohol sugars. And protein and carbohydrates have 4 calories, and alcohol has 7, and fats have 9. And then those are all broken down into different categories of complete amino acids or short and long. So there's this endless dissection of stuff. But the bottom line is I can throw a stick of wood in one of these calorie meters and burn it, and it says it's going to give me 200 calories. Well, I'm not going to eat a stick of wood and expect to get anywhere and do the job. It's not going to work. I could throw a newspaper in there, and it's going to release. Like this is such an asinine way of looking at food. And what happens is, of course, we have these cosmetic ideals put out there that you got to look like this, and you got to have, and everybody's recording how, what percentage of body fat they have and how much they can bench press or how much they can do in a hold or, how many chin-ups they can do or whatever. It has become a, social proof that I'm okay because the reality is what's the message behind most marketing is that you're not good enough unless you look this way, you have this wife, you're married to this wife, you drive this car, you've got a six-pack of glistening abs, your body fat's this level. You only eat 100% raw, biodynamic, organically grown, alien seed, fused food that's been grown in a geodesic dome. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And then, people are out there, they're going, dear God, this is so complicated, and how am I ever going to look this good so I can feel good about myself? Look, people can feel good about themselves right away, but they've got to get out of this calorie model. I don't have any of my clients, none, zero, nada, none of them count calories. None of them. And that's the first thing that people need to get inside their head. They need to eat nutrient-dense foods. The foods that come in a raw form, in a wild crafted form, they tend to be stronger. But that's not always available. So you go to the next best thing. Go to an organic. From there, if you get a pesticide one or a regular conventional one, because there's places in the world that I've traveled, you got no choice. Wash it in a high pH water to get the pesticides off, because pesticides are one of these things that rust the body intensely. Okay, and another thing, and it strips away the nutrients. And the other thing is make sure you're doing your due diligence on a daily basis. I make sure that all my clients are doing a couple of key things every single day, so that number one, they're getting the nutrients they need so that their body can protect themselves from free radical damage. Two, that we know they're able to absorb whatever the food is that they're getting, because oftentimes they don't have the capacity, the time, the energy, or the know-how how to determine what food is the best for them, or they don't even have access to it. And then on top of that is to make sure they're doing a cleansing program from the brain garbage that's being propagated out there on all these different information channels that are leading them to the dance of delusion and the land of confusion, because one guy says this and one guy says that and that person says that. Like, can't we just trust what our body says? Monitor your results, check what you're doing, set your goals, have someone outside to monitor with you as you learn, and then eventually you'll redevelop your connection to yourself, and your cells will tell you exactly what you do. And that, of course, is the biophotonic message. You start listening to yourself. You start listening to the universe that is broadcasting thousands of messages to you, but they don't come on the internet, and they don't come on an advert flashing neon sign, and they don't come on a bottle of pills at your local supplement store. It comes from within. All knowledge comes from within. That's why we discover it. It's already there. We got to uncover it. We got to take the cover off it and look inside and see what's there.
I think you brought it back to its simplest component, and really to the root of the fruit, so to speak, is that it really is within all of us. I know for me that I had all this inside of me, and it just took that trigger to really unlock that genius. And I think that really is the core. The core of it is that we live in a society that's propagated on so many different superficial ideals, and it's almost like a camouflage to keep us from going within, to go in spirit, or to become inspired. All these words are go in, like you said. And you said something that I think is really important, is that people ultimately, the human experience is this is my, I'm kind of giving my own spin on it, but the human experience is really a sequence of feeling states. And people internally or instinctively, they just want to feel better. And I really feel like that is the root of the whole discussion. So nutrition, properly applied, can make you feel a lot better. But you brought up the most important thing, is that use that as a vehicle to go inward and find your own truth.
That is so true. And as you say that, one thing I've noticed with coaching, literally thousands of people around the world, is if they have a concept of suffering, or they're in an emotional state of not feeling good about themselves, they tend to be attracted to dietary programs that reinforce them not feeling good about themselves. And of course and I think that's where it all starts.
Wow, that's a lot to consider right there. I think there's a lot of truth to that, and that has a lot to do with marketing and sales pitch and keeping people kind of hooked into a certain way of doing something from a marketing perspective. I mean, if you give someone the tools and they can go off and apply the tools in their own life, then you kind of shoot yourself in the foot from that perspective, but not if you're coming from the right perspective, and that I don't even know where I'm going with that, but yeah, I think ultimately what you just said there was just a very powerful thought to consider.
Well, it comes from the experience of being cosmetically driven back when I was young. I mean, let's just look at the bodybuilding market, which is no different for a young girl looking at advertising magazines today. So, same thing for guys. If you look in Hollywood now, they have these hyper masculine males. Almost all the top Hollywood stars are on the sauce, and by that means I'm talking about anti-aging, bioidentical hormones. They'll wrap it all up into all these nice, cool sounding names. And where I grew up, they're on the sauce, the juice, whatever, to look a certain way, and they're taking whatever because they got to look like a freak, because that's what the movie industry demands. They need this hyper-masculine male. And as a 15-year-old boy, I looked at these images of hyper-masculine males, and I'm like, well, obviously I don't measure up. And, of course, they attach with them fame and success and overt sexuality and all these internal drives that my little reptilian brain gets really, really juiced from. And my forebrain, which separates us from the animals, doesn't have a chance when I'm in those zones. And the art of marketing today has got to such a high level. They've crafted an amazing ability to access that reptilian mind. And that reptilian mind, he wants to eat, he wants to fight, and he wants to replicate. That's what he does. That comes up from single cell organisms all the way up into the evolutionary chain into human beings, and we all have that in us. And what happens is we are attracted to these systems that subvert our conscious ability, our ability that separates us from the animals, to use our intelligence to determine what it is that we require. Even all the animals, they already know what to eat. They don't have to be taught. But we've lost it. We've been so confused with this stuff that we've really got lost in it. And but the great thing is it's coming around. The more we get lost, the closer we get to the truth. It's so weird, I think the Buddhist said, when you're lost, start at the beginning. So what is the beginning? Well, if I look at animals, if I look at nature, what do natures do? You look at any animal, they go for the garden. I'm out here in New Brunswick right now. There's a lot of gardens. Well, what do the deer go for? They go for the vegetables that are just coming up. That's the sprouts. Well, if you look at sprouts are loaded in enzymes, and they're loaded in amino acids, and they have a lot of energy, and they're very small. They eat the sprouts, and they go all day. A moose is 1,500 pounds, and it eats like moss and stuff. He's not counting his calories. He's not saying, geez, did I get enough protein today? Did I do enough cardio? No, I just swam a lake. He ate some moss, he swam a lake, fought off the flies all day long, and, saw some humans going, wow, what are they eating all that weird stuff at the picnic table? So when you're lost, go out into nature and just pay attention, and it'll remind you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what, Wade, with the time we have, I would like to take this opportunity to dive just a little bit further into the nature of our first part of the discussion, which was metabolic disorders, and I want to take it into an area that I'm really into, and I know you are. I remember years ago reading Dr. Edward Howell's book, Enzyme Nutrition, and he made a statement that really caught me, and basically what he said was, all physiological breakdowns are due to the lack of enzymes or enzymatic capacity in the body. And through the years of my research, I came to these kind of ideas, and I would just like you to elaborate on them as it's relevant to the topic. From my perspective, I feel like enzymes are basically the scrubbing mechanism for fibrotic scar tissue, stuff like calcification buildup, and protein coating that develops around certain disease cells that will go unnamed on this podcast. And these issues, from my observation, appear to represent some of the root causes of most of the breakdowns that we see, both physiologically and neurologically. So I want to get your take on that statement.
I'm in absolute agreement, and I read Dr. Howell's book, Enzyme Nutrition. Of course, he had taught my mentor, Dr. Michael O'Brien, and I recommend everybody who's into health read that book. It'll totally transform your perspective and what we're talking about. He really articulated it well. Now, what was interesting is enzymes and probiotics are really just little bags of enzymes that do specific functions. So they're essentially just a little more conscious bag of enzymes. Enzymes handle everything in your body from thinking to blinking. Every metabolic process, every movement, every thought, every chemical transaction, everything requires an enzyme. Now, according to Dr. Howell's research, he stated, this was back in the 40s, the average 40-year-old has less than 30% of the enzymes present in their body that they had at birth. This is what contributes to the degeneration and aging of our society, because as oxidative stress comes in whatever form, whether it's exercise, whether it's hot temperature, whether it's pesticides, it requires enzymes to break this down. And when you grow food on a mineral deficient soil, as we have been doing for the last 3 generations, the plant will give up protein in its body and convert it to enzymes to keep the plant growing. So protein content goes down as minerals in the soil are depleted. Now, let's just take this over to humans. So what happens with humans during the aging and degeneration process or in metabolic dysfunction? Well, we convert protein tissues, muscle tissue particularly, or skin tissue. That's why we get wrinkled and old. We start doing damage to the system. We're converting that to make enough enzymes to keep our body going. And Dr. Howell stated that the length of any organism's lifespan was directly related to the inverse enzyme potential. That is, how many enzymes were present in the body would determine how long that body tended to stay on the planet. And in his experiments, and this came from Pottinger's cats. Pottinger's cats was a famous study that, Pottinger took these cats and he fed some of them an enzyme deficient diet. That would be diets that are cooked food, because cooking food kills all the enzymes, and then that means the animal had to use its own enzymatic reserves, its own metabolic enzymes, and convert them into digestive enzymes to break down your food. And every doctor will say you don't need enzymes because your body breaks it down. No, all food in its natural state has the enzymes to break it down. Even us, when we die, the muscle tissue releases a chemical that activates catechin, which is an enzyme that starts breaking down the tissue, and we dissolve and turn in and become food for the bacteria. And that's just the natural order of things. And digestion is controlled rotting. We break down enzymes. That's why you cut an apple open, you leave it on a counter, it starts to break down. But when you irradiate it or you cook it, now you nuke all the enzymes, and now that apple will stay on the shelf for 2 weeks without going bad. And so what happens is people are accelerating the degeneration of their body through toxic diets, highly cooked, highly processed food, chemicals that are found, preservatives, Also, all the host of estrogen-based toxins. They are eating diets that are mineral deficient. So all of these are putting stress on them oxidatively, and it's also requiring more and more enzymes in order for their body to produce. And of course, all women know this. All women, I first discovered this with high-performance female athletes, and they would have a child. And sometimes after one child, they couldn't regain their form. Sometimes it was two, but it was almost always across the board after three. They had a hard time regaining their physical vitality levels. And what I came to believe was that they were transferring their enzymatic pool to their children. And then when they were trying to perform at a high level, they couldn't do it. Now, when you take this over to a lot of these athletes, like fitness competitors, it's widespread in all these fitness competitors. They go on these restrictive diets with massive amounts of exercise, huge amounts of these chemical-laden, calorie-deficient, and may I say emotionally deficient lifestyles, because it's all about how I look in a bikini and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if that's your whole life, you've got some serious self-esteem problems that are going to set you up for these kind of metabolic situations. And then, of course, now you pack all this stuff in, so it's a cascade of effects. And then eventually they're like, all of a sudden their T4 isn't converting to T3. That's what regulates metabolism. They've taken a massive amounts of a stimulants, which has blown out their adrenals. You do a hair analysis, and their mineral imbalances are all over the place. They're not getting enough oxygen inside their body, so now they're relying on more anaerobic activity. And then the stress keeps building up, and then pretty soon they start gaining weight. And they don't know what to do, and they try another diet, and they try this, and they get this expert, and then they start feeling worse when stress is oxidative, and it's just this endless cycle, and it's got to stop, and it stops by very simple. You take 3 servings of plant-based protein a day. You consume a high protease-based enzyme with it, because protease, in my opinion, is the big factor because of undigested protein inside the body that we need to metabolize, and for some reason the body cuts off protease production sooner than other enzymes inside the body. And you need to eat a big rainbow salad every single day, and then you need to reduce your training to a level that makes sense, and you need to allot enough time for your body to rebuild itself, and it will naturally go back to the state you want. That's how you overcome metabolic damage.
Yeah, you said a lot of interesting things in there. For clarification, I just want to mention, when you say T3 to T4, you're talking about thyroid hormone, right?
Yeah, that's what. There's a conversion process that goes on inside the body, and of course, if you look at a lot of these people with metabolic damage, there's a relation between adrenals and thyroid, and that's, again, keep in mind, these are symptoms, not causes. And it's really clear. People say, oh, well, my thyroid's normal, and that's the thing, and I've got this, or I've got metabolic disorder. No, that's a symptom of modern lifestyles. And here's the great news. The body will correct all of these amazing metabolic processes if you feed it the things it requires to do it, but it's got to have enough workers, and that's where enzymes come in. Enzymes are the workers. Most people are shocked to know I have been taking enzymes 25 a day minimum for the last 10 years. How I got out of metabolic dysfunction myself, because I've been there, I know what it's like, I felt the pain. 42 pounds in 11 weeks, folks, it's not good. And I came out of it, I took 100 enzymes a day for a year. I was better in 6 months, but I said, I want to see how far it can go. And over the years, I haven't found a limit. I've had scars that are now healing on my body that didn't heal before. Like scars that I've had for, literally my whole life. They're starting to go away because my enzymatic pool is getting enough that it breaks that down. And Dr. O'Brien told me this. And Dr. Howell talked about this. And I've seen this duplicated over and over and over again. So Just follow what works.
Well, there's a lot for people to consider, and I'm definitely on board with everything you just said there, especially that's why I wanted to bring up the enzyme topic, because there tends to be a lot of confusion and oftentimes controversy in the more of the natural hygiene type of field, and that's not necessarily something we have to jump head first into, but just for clarification of the people listening to this, because I understand that all of us come from different philosophical backgrounds and we come from different nutritional schools of thought. And why would it be, I posed the question for the viewers listening, why would it, if you're eating an enzyme-rich diet or what we consider to be an enzyme-rich diet of raw plant food, maybe people are doing raw dairy products, whatever it may be, why would we need to take enzyme supplementation?
Absolutely great question, and it's something that I think is very pertinent. The whole basis of a live food diet or plant-based diet is that you get more enzymes. But people are not, and going back to the start of our conversation, look at a conventionally grown food and look at something that you find wild-crafted. There is a massive difference in the taste, in the flavor, in the enzymatic potential, because anytime that you accelerate growth through fertilizers, pesticides, or through hybrid growing, you lose a certain enzymatic component. Remember, going back at the turn of the century, they found that wheat was losing its protein content as it converted that into enzymes in order to grow itself on mineral deficient soils. Life will go on no matter what. It will compromise. It won't be the same, but it will go on. And the same thing for people. Now, if I eat a completely live, raw food diet that's per se enzymatically rich, the only amount of enzymes that are going to be present in any live food is enough to digest it. That's if it's in its organic raw state. Nature doesn't waste anything, so it's not making I cannot replace my enzymatic reserves just by eating organically raw, wild-crafted, whatever you want to call it, food. I can't do it because here I am at 40 years old. If I've only got 30% or less, according to Dr. Howell, of my enzymatic pool, I can't eat my way into the enzyme. I can't eat my way back into the damage I've done. I've got to find a way to infiltrate my system and get more enzymes in there. So by doing this, we look at it, well, what are my options? Well, a lot of people say, well, you can eat, highly enzymatic foods. Well, that's true. You can do that, but I'm not interested in getting by. I'm interested in overcoming a debilitating condition or producing an extraordinary result as an athlete. So there are different types of enzymes. There are metabolic enzymes, okay? So there are just normal plant-based enzymes. There are things like pancreatic enzymes, and pancreatic enzymes, for example, will work in a very narrow pH range, or an animal-based enzyme. A plant-based enzyme usually works in a bigger range. The four main ones being amylase, lipase, protease, and cellulase. And there's there's literally 3,000 ones, but I think if you get those main ones inside your system, your body will break down, particularly protease, amylase, and lipase. Protease breaks down protein, lipase breaks down fats, amylase breaks down carbohydrates. Well, when you now have methodologies, and this is one of the great things that Dr. Howell did, is he developed incredible ways of increasing the enzymatic potential massively in the products he was making. So he developed cultured enzymes, which was actually practiced for thousands of years in Eastern cultures. So he cultured these enzymes. So then you get a cultured enzyme. It's about 1,000 times more powerful than an enzyme that you might find like bromelain or papain or something like that that's been extracted from a fruit or from an animal. And so regardless of your dietary stuff, and what I suggest people do, whatever enzyme that you want to try, take the enzyme you do, throw a couple of them in a bowl of oatmeal and stir it up and see what happens. The kind of enzymes that I put into my body will liquefy that oatmeal in a couple of minutes. I mean, it's turned to liquid. and the taste of it changes. My ability to extract the information, and I say that as information. We are getting information from our food. It's not just nutrition. It's nutritional information becomes increased, and I'm not putting stress on my system, and that allows my body to metabolize things. It's why all animals, when they're hurt, they don't eat because they don't want to exert enzymatic energy to digest food. They simply let their enzymes go off and create metabolic enzymes to heal themselves, and that's one of the practices of fasting. But you can't fast yourself into increasing your enzymatic pool. You're going to take that away from your muscle tissue, and this is one of the negativities or the detriments I've found. A lot of people are attracted into the raw food diet because they have compromised systems, and it does make a lot of sense. And the detoxification process is recommended, and they fast and they cleanse, and these are all awesome methodologies. But at a certain point, you've got to start building the tissues up, and if you've exhausted your enzymatic pool trying to eat a diet that is low in amino acids and low in enzymes, your body is going to convert the muscle mass into that, and that's why I think you see a lot of people in the raw food community who don't carry a lot of muscle. They just don't, and that was one of my big things. Well, I want to be muscular. I want to still do the athletic things that I like to do, and I'm a strength training guy, so I'm on the extreme end of that. But the same issue for people who are having metabolic issues. If you can't convert your T4 into T3, if you can't support your adrenals through good mineralization inside your body, and if you're not eating enough fiber and stuff in your diet, guess what? You're going to struggle with your metabolism. And on top of it, if you want to get out of there faster, slamming lots of cultured enzymes are going to increase and improve that process.
Yeah, brilliant explanation. I agree 100%. So I think this is a great place to conclude. I want to thank you so much for coming onto the air and sharing all this great information and experience. Where can everyone on here find your work?
Well, anybody can pop to my site at WadeLightheart.com. Go in there. We can do a little health profile. If you have some questions, I am always there to answer questions. Usually it's a 48 to 72 hour turnaround time, depending if I'm traveling or not. So WadeLightheart.com, and we'd be happy to answer all your questions. And for those of you who are looking for a high protease-based enzyme, such as the ones I use, they can check in with your site, Ronnie. I believe that you're carrying Masszymes at your site. It's the ones I use, and we love them. So they can just check the link on the site.
Yeah, and those enzymes are fantastic. Me and both my roommate actually love those enzymes, and those, for all the viewers, those are available on this page that you click to find this interview. So there should be no problem finding that. So once again, Wade, I want to thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Ronnie. I love your work. I love what you're doing. And for those of you who come in and check out Ronnie's work, follow this guy. He is doing great things in the world, and I'm just really honored to be your friend, man. And I can't wait to see you soon out in California.
Yeah, thank you. The feeling is very mutual. All right, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed this segment. This was an incredible information, content-rich segment that I'm going to be personally taking notes on. I suggest all of you out there in virtual land do the same thing. So with that said, this has been another edition of the Expanded Health and Human Potential Radio Show. We will catch you guys next time.